Rude waiter refuses to serve autistic man, but little did he know who the man's father was. The restaurant buzzed with the low hum of conversations, the clinking of glasses and the occasional burst of laughter. It was a high-end establishment, the kind of place where reservations were booked weeks in advance and every table was dressed with pristine white linens. Connor, one of the waitstaff, weaved through the dining room with practiced ease, balancing plates of gourmet dishes and flashing his rehearsed smile at the affluent clientele. He lived for moments like these. To Connor, every interaction was a stepping stone, a chance to ingratiate himself with the right people. He wasn't just a waiter. He was an ambitious man biding his time until something better came along. At the corner of the restaurant, the hostess led a young man to a table near the window. Liam, slender and neatly dressed, walked with a cautious, deliberate pace. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the bustling environment with a mixture of curiosity and unease. When the hostess gestured for him to sit, Liam hesitated before carefully pulling out the chair and settling in. Connor noticed Liam immediately. The young man didn't fit the usual mold of the restaurant's clientele. There was something about his body language, the slight stiffness in his movements, the way he avoided eye contact with the hostess, that caught Connor's attention. "Great," Connor muttered under his breath. "Another one who doesn't belong." Connor approached the table, his practiced smile barely concealing the condescension in his eyes. "Good evening. Can I get you something to drink?" he asked, his tone clipped. Liam didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked down at the menu, his fingers tracing the edges of the page. After a moment, he said softly, "Water, please." Connor raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Just water? Are you sure you're in the right place?" Liam's eyes flicked up for a brief moment, then back to the menu. "Yes, water." Connor sighed theatrically and left the table, muttering under his breath about wasted time. When he returned with the water, he plunked the glass down on the table with little care, spilling a few drops onto the pristine white cloth. Liam flinched but said nothing. He continued to study the menu, his fingers now tapping gently against the table in a rhythmic pattern. Connor rolled his eyes, leaning down slightly. "Look, this isn't a diner. If you're not ordering, maybe you should free up the table for someone else." Liam's hand froze mid-tap, and he looked up at Connor with wide, uncertain eyes. "I'm still deciding." Connor smirked. "Sure you are. Take your time," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm as he walked away. At a nearby table, a waitress named Mia had been watching the exchange with growing discomfort. She had worked with Connor long enough to recognize his disdain for anyone who didn't fit his narrow idea of a worthy customer. But this time it felt particularly cruel. She made a mental note to check on the young man when she had a chance. Liam sat in silence, his fingers now tracing the condensation on his glass. The rhythmic tapping had stopped, replaced by small, almost imperceptible movements that seemed to soothe him. He didn't notice the hushed whispers from the neighboring tables or the occasional sideways glances in his direction. Mia approached cautiously, her warm smile a stark contrast to Connor's earlier demeanor. "Hi there," she said gently. "Are you ready to order, or do you need a little more time?" Liam looked up, his expression softening at the kindness in her voice. "More time, please," he said quietly. "Of course," Mia said. "Take all the time you need." As Mia walked away, Connor intercepted her near the kitchen. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Checking on a customer," Mia replied, her tone calm but firm. Connor scoffed. "That guy. He's wasting our time. Probably doesn't even know what half the menu means." "Maybe," Mia said, crossing her arms. "Or maybe he's just trying to enjoy his evening like everyone else." Connor shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "You're too soft, Mia. This is why you're still stuck waiting tables instead of running the place. And this," Mia shot back, "is why nobody here likes working with you." Connor glared at her but said nothing. He grabbed a tray of drinks and stormed off toward another table. Meanwhile, Liam had made his decision and was trying to flag down a waiter. When Connor finally returned, his patience was clearly wearing thin. "Ready now?" he asked, his tone curt. "Yes," Liam said, pointing to an item on the menu. "This one, please." Connor glanced at the menu and snorted. "You sure? That's one of the pricier dishes." "Not exactly what I'd expect from someone ordering water." Liam didn't respond. He simply nodded, his gaze fixed on the table. Connor shrugged. "Your call," he said, scribbling down the order and walking away. As the night went on, Liam's quiet presence continued to draw attention. Some patrons whispered among themselves, speculating about why someone like him would be dining alone at such an upscale establishment. Others shot him pitying looks, mistaking his reserved demeanor for loneliness. But Liam didn't seem to notice. He sat quietly, his fingers occasionally resuming their rhythmic tapping. When his food arrived, he ate with deliberate care, savoring each bite as if it were a small victory. Mia continued to keep an eye on him, her instincts telling her there was more to his story than met the eye. She noticed the way he seemed to retreat into himself whenever Connor approached, and it only deepened her resolve to intervene if necessary. By the end of the evening, Liam asked for the check, his voice as soft and steady as it had been all night. Connor handed it to him with a smirk, clearly expecting a problem. But Liam simply pulled out a sleek black card and placed it on the table. Connor's smirk faltered, and for the first time that night, he hesitated. He processed the payment without a word, the realization dawning on him that he might have misjudged more than just Liam's ability to pay. As Liam stood to leave, he glanced back at Connor and said almost to himself, "Thank you for your service." Connor didn't respond. He was too busy wondering what, exactly, he had just gotten himself into. Connor couldn't shake the unease that had settled over him after Liam left. The sleek black card was an anomaly, something completely out of sync with his earlier assumptions. It wasn't just any card, it was one that signified a level of wealth far beyond what most of the restaurant's patrons carried. Yet the young man had been so unassuming, so quiet. Connor's instincts told him he had overlooked something important. The next day the restaurant buzzed with its usual energy, but Connor found himself distracted. As he prepared for the dinner service, he overheard Mia speaking to another waiter about the young man from the night before. "I think there was more to him than people realize," Mia said. "He wasn't just shy. He seemed thoughtful. Like he was observing everything around him." "Maybe," the other waiter replied. "Or maybe he was just out of his element." Mia shook her head. "I don't think so. There's something about him. Did you see the way he paid? That wasn't someone out of their depth." Connor rolled his eyes and walked away, refusing to dwell on the conversation. But the unease lingered. A few days later, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the restaurant just as the dinner rush began. The driver stepped out and opened the door for an older man in a tailored suit. He carried himself with an air of quiet authority, his presence commanding attention without effort. It was James, the father Liam had mentioned only briefly to the few who knew him well. James entered the restaurant, his sharp gaze sweeping across the room until it landed on Connor. Without a word, he approached the host's stand and requested a table. The host, recognizing the man immediately, scrambled to accommodate him despite the packed dining room. Connor didn't notice James at first. He was busy entertaining a group of wealthy regulars, ensuring their every whim was met with exaggerated enthusiasm. It wasn't until Mia nudged him, her eyes wide, that he turned to see the distinguished man sitting alone at one of his tables. "Who is that?" Connor whispered, suddenly nervous. Mia shrugged. "No idea, but he looks important." Connor straightened his tie and grabbed a menu, his usual arrogance returning as he approached the table. "Good evening, sir," he said, his tone polished. "Welcome to our restaurant. Can I start you off with something to drink?" James looked up, his expression calm but piercing. "Water for now." Connor nodded, sensing the man's seriousness. He returned moments later with the water, setting it down with a practiced smile. "Our specials tonight include—" "I'm not here for the specials," James interrupted, his voice steady but firm. "I'm here to speak to you." Connor blinked, taken aback. "Me?" "Yes," James said, folding his hands on the table. "You served my son a few nights ago." Connor's stomach dropped. He had served many people that week, but the mention of a son immediately brought Liam to mind. I'm not sure I recall," he said, attempting to stall. James's gaze didn't waver. "A young man, quiet, well-mannered. You dismissed him, insulted him, and made him feel unwelcome." Connor's face flushed. "Sir, James held up a hand, silencing him. "My son is autistic. He processes the world differently, but that does not give you the right to treat him, or anyone else, with disrespect." Connor stammered, his usual composure crumbling. "I didn't mean—" "You meant exactly what you did," James said, his voice like steel. "You assumed he didn't belong because he didn't meet your narrow expectations. You judged him without understanding who he is, or who he might be." Connor opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The weight of James's words left him paralyzed. The dining room had grown quieter as diners began to notice the exchange. Mia watched from a distance, her heart pounding as she realized what was happening. She wanted to step in to support James's message, but she knew this was his moment to speak. James leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering but losing none of its intensity. You've made a career out of catering to appearances, but let me tell you something. True worth isn't found in a tailored suit or an expensive watch. It's found in how we treat others, especially those who don't fit into our preconceived boxes. Connor's face burned with shame. I'm sorry, he muttered, barely audible. Sorry isn't enough, James said. Change is what matters. If you want to salvage any integrity, you'll reflect on how you got here, and you'll do better. With that, James stood, smoothing his jacket as he prepared to leave. But before he walked away, he turned back one last time. And for the record, he said, his tone softening slightly, my son is extraordinary. You'd be lucky to know him. The room was silent as James exited, the weight of his words lingering long after he was gone. Connor remained rooted to the spot, his mind racing. He felt exposed, stripped of the persona he had so carefully cultivated. For the first time in years, he questioned not just his actions but the person he had become. Mia approached him cautiously, her expression a mix of disappointment and sympathy. That was hard to hear, she said quietly. But maybe it's what you needed. Connor didn't respond. He simply nodded, the sting of truth settling deep within him. The restaurant staff whispered among themselves long after James had left. Connor, still shaken, avoided eye contact with everyone, retreating to the back of the kitchen under the pretense of organizing the inventory. But even there, he couldn't escape the echoes of James's words. True worth isn't found in appearances. It's in how we treat others. Those words replayed in his mind, louder and sharper each time. Connor leaned against a shelf stacked with sparkling clean glasses, rubbing his temples. He had been called out before, by colleagues, customers, even his own manager, but never like this. This was different. James hadn't just reprimanded him. He had held up a mirror and forced Connor to confront a side of himself he had spent years justifying. Mia found him a few minutes later, her arms crossed but her expression softer than before. You okay? She asked. Connor nodded, though he clearly wasn't. He paused, searching for the right words. I didn't think it was a big deal. I didn't think he'd care that much. Mia raised an eyebrow. You mean you didn't think Liam would care that much? Connor winced at her directness but nodded. Yeah, I guess. Mia sighed. It's not just about Liam though, is it? It's about how you treat everyone. It's about the assumptions you make before you even know their story. Connor looked at her, frustration flickering in his eyes. Why do you care so much? Because people like Liam deserve better, Mia said firmly. And because if you don't change, this isn't the last time you'll get called out like that. Connor didn't respond. He stared at the ground, his thoughts a tangled mess of regret and defensiveness. Mia gave him one last pointed look before walking away. The following evening, the restaurant was quieter than usual, giving Connor time to reflect. As he cleared tables and prepped for the next wave of customers, he couldn't stop replaying the events of the night before. James's calm but powerful presence haunted him. The mention of Liam's autism had struck a chord he hadn't expected. Connor had spent his life looking for ways to climb the social ladder, dismissing anyone he deemed unimportant along the way. But now he realized how many people he had hurt in the process. Around closing time, Connor saw Mia sitting at the bar, sipping a cup of tea. She looked up as he approached, a guarded expression on her face. I've been thinking, Connor began hesitantly. Good, Mia said, not letting him off the hook easily. He sighed, leaning against the bar. About what he said. About Liam. I think I owe him an apology. Mia tilted her head, studying him. Do you mean it? Or are you just saying that because you're afraid of losing your job? Connor hesitated, but then his shoulders sagged. I mean it, he admitted. I messed up. I didn't see him for who he was and I acted like he didn't matter. That's not who I want to be. Mia's expression softened slightly. Then maybe it's time to prove it? Connor didn't know how to get in touch with Liam, but he remembered the black card and the quiet authority with which James had carried himself. After some effort and a few discreet conversations with other staff members, Connor managed to track down an email address connected to James. He spent hours drafting and deleting messages trying to find the right words. Finally he wrote, Dear Mr. James, my name is Connor. I was the waiter who served your son Liam a few nights ago at restaurant name. I want to start by apologizing, not just to him but to you as well. I let my assumptions and arrogance cloud my judgment, and I treated Liam in a way that was unfair and unkind. For that, I am deeply sorry. Meeting you was a wake-up call. You made me realize that I've been approaching people all wrong, and it's something I'm committed to changing. I hope I can find a way to make things right, not just for Liam but for anyone I've treated unfairly in the past. Thank you for showing me what true respect looks like. Sincerely, Connor. He hit send before he could second-guess himself again. Days passed and Connor heard nothing. He threw himself into his work, trying to be more mindful of how he treated others. He made a point to listen more, to treat each customer with genuine respect regardless of their appearance or demeanor. It wasn't easy, old habits were hard to break, but he could feel himself changing. Then one evening an email arrived. Connor stared at the notification on his phone, his stomach flipping. The subject line was simple: an apology. He hesitated for a moment before opening the email. Dear Connor, thank you for your message. I appreciate your willingness to reflect on your actions and your honesty in reaching out. It takes courage to acknowledge mistakes and even more to strive for change. As for making things right with Liam, he values kindness and understanding above all else. If you truly want to make amends, consider reaching out to him personally, not for your sake but for his. Show him, through your actions, that you've learned from this experience. Best regards, James. Connor read the email twice, then a third time. He felt equal parts relief and apprehension. The thought of facing Liam again made his palms sweat, but he knew this was the next step. He needed to see this through. A week later, Connor found himself standing outside a community center. Through the glass doors, he could see a small gathering in one of the rooms, a group of people working quietly at a long table. Art supplies were scattered across its surface, and at the center of it all was Liam. Connor took a deep breath and stepped inside. The receptionist gave him a warm smile and directed him to the room. As he approached, he noticed how focused Liam was, his hands moving with precision as he worked on a vibrant painting. The other participants seemed to orbit around him, drawing inspiration from his quiet confidence. Connor hesitated at the door, unsure of how to interrupt. But then Liam looked up, his gaze meeting Connor's. There was no immediate recognition, just the same calm curiosity that had unnerved Connor during their first encounter. Hi, Connor said, his voice softer than usual. I don't know if you remember me? Liam tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Connor stepped closer, holding his hands up in a gesture of peace. I'm Connor, he continued. I was your waiter at the restaurant. I wasn't kind to you and I've been thinking about it ever since. Liam's eyes flickered with recognition and he nodded slowly. Connor took that as a cue to keep going. I made a lot of assumptions about you, Connor said, his voice trembling slightly. And I treated you unfairly. That wasn't right. You didn't deserve that. Liam studied him for a moment before reaching for a piece of paper and a marker. He wrote something quickly and held it up. Why are you here now? Connor swallowed hard. Because I want to apologize. Not just with words but by showing you that I can be better. You've already taught me more than you realize just by being yourself. Liam's lips curved into a small smile, and he gestured for Connor to sit. Relieved, Connor pulled up a chair, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. The two of them spent the next hour talking. Or rather, Connor talked while Liam listened, occasionally writing down responses or nodding in understanding. Connor learned more about Liam's world, his love for art, and the challenges he faced navigating a society that often misunderstood him. By the end of their conversation, Connor felt humbled. Liam's perspective was unlike anything he had ever encountered, and it opened his eyes to just how narrow his own had been. Thank you, Connor said as he stood to leave. For giving me a chance to make things right. Liam wrote one last message and handed it to him. Everyone deserves a second chance. From that day forward, Connor made a conscious effort to be more understanding, both at work and in his personal life. He became a better listener, a more thoughtful colleague, and someone who no longer judged others at face value. The experience changed him, not just as a waiter but as a person. And while he knew he still had a long way to go, he carried Liam's words with him as a reminder that growth was always possible. Over the following weeks, Connor began integrating what he had learned into his daily interactions. At the restaurant, he went out of his way to treat every customer with the same respect, regardless of their appearance or demeanor. He noticed the way his colleagues responded too. Mia in particular gave him an approving nod whenever she saw him go the extra mile for someone. But Connor knew actions spoke louder than gestures. He decided to take things further, seeking opportunities to truly make a difference in his workplace. He suggested to the manager that the staff undergo training to better understand and serve customers with different needs, including those on the spectrum. The manager, initially skeptical, agreed to a trial after seeing Connor's newfound dedication. Mia of course noticed the shift in him. One afternoon as they were polishing glasses before the dinner rush, she broke the silence. "You've changed," she said, her tone light but sincere. Connor paused, then smiled faintly. "Yeah, I guess I have." "What brought that on?" she asked, leaning on the counter. Connor thought about it for a moment. "Liam," he admitted. "And his dad. They made me realize I've been living my life in a way that I'm not proud of." Mia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Well, whatever it is, it's working. The staff's noticed. Even the customers." Connor chuckled. "Baby steps, I guess." Mia tilted her head. "Sometimes that's all it takes." One evening, while closing up the restaurant, Connor received an email that stopped him in his tracks. It was from James. "Dear Connor, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to meet with Liam. He shared with me that he appreciated your apology and your willingness to learn. Actions like yours are what create the understanding and kindness we need in this world. It's not often that people reflect as deeply as you have. I hope you continue to carry these lessons forward, not just for Liam but for everyone you meet. You've taken the first step, and that's no small thing. With gratitude, James." Connor sat back in his chair, the words sinking in. He hadn't expected a follow-up, much less one so gracious. It solidified his commitment to being better, not just for Liam but for himself. Weeks turned into months, and the changes Connor had implemented began to ripple outward. The training sessions he proposed were well received, and the staff found themselves better equipped to handle diverse customers. The restaurant even gained recognition for its inclusivity, drawing in patrons who valued the effort. One afternoon, as Connor finished a shift, a familiar figure walked through the door. It was Liam, holding a small canvas under his arm. Connor's face lit up, and he immediately went to greet him. "Hey Liam," he said warmly. "It's good to see you." Liam nodded and handed Connor the canvas. It was a painting, a vivid depiction of the restaurant's interior with bright, warm colors that seemed to radiate a sense of belonging. Connor stared at it, speechless. "Did you paint this?" Liam nodded again, a shy smile tugging at his lips. He held up a note he had written. "For you. Thank you." Connor felt a lump rise in his throat. "Liam, this is incredible. Thank you." Mia walked over, curious about the exchange, and her eyes widened when she saw the painting. "Wow, Liam. That's amazing." Liam smiled, his confidence growing under their praise. For the first time, Connor saw him not as someone he needed to apologize to, but as someone who had taught him more about kindness and growth than he thought possible. That painting found a permanent place in the restaurant, hung prominently near the entrance. It became a symbol of the transformation that had taken place, not just in Connor but in the entire staff. And every time Connor saw it, he was reminded of Liam's quiet strength and the power of a second chance. The painting quickly became a topic of conversation among the restaurant's patrons. Customers would stop and admire the bold, colorful strokes and ask about the story behind it. Connor found himself retelling the tale in bits and pieces, omitting his own mistakes but emphasizing Liam's talent and the lessons he'd learned from their interactions. One evening, a couple lingered at the entrance, captivated by the artwork. The woman turned to Connor and asked, "Who's the artist?" "His name's Liam," Connor replied with a small smile. "He's one of the most talented and thoughtful people I've ever met." The woman nodded, her gaze lingering on the painting. "It's beautiful. You can feel the warmth in it?" Connor nodded. "That's exactly who he is." Word of Liam's painting spread, and soon, more people began visiting the restaurant, curious about the artist behind the vibrant work. Connor reached out to Liam, suggesting he bring more of his art to display. To Connor's surprise, Liam agreed. A week later, Liam arrived with a collection of his pieces, each one more striking than the last. Connor and Mia helped him set up a small gallery wall in a quiet corner of the restaurant, where patrons could admire the paintings and even purchase them. Within days, the first piece sold, and Liam's confidence grew with each sale. Connor watched from the sidelines as Liam's art gained recognition. It wasn't just about the paintings, it was about the story behind them. People connected with Liam's perspective, his unique way of seeing the world. Connor felt a swell of pride every time someone complimented Liam's work, knowing he had played a small role in helping this moment come to life. One evening, as the restaurant bustled with activity, James walked in. He wasn't there to confront anyone this time. He was there to see the gallery wall. Connor greeted him with genuine warmth, no longer feeling the weight of shame from their first encounter. "Thank you for coming," Connor said as James studied the paintings. "Liam's work has been transformative for this place." James turned to Connor, a faint smile on his face. "It seems he's not the only one who's grown." Connor nodded, the weight of those words sinking in. "He's taught me more than I could ever teach him." James looked back at the paintings, his expression thoughtful. Liam has a way of doing that. He reminds people to see the world differently, to challenge their assumptions. Connor hesitated before asking, "Do you think he knows how much of an impact he's had?" James smiled. "I tell him often. But hearing it from others, like you, means even more." As the weeks went on, Liam's art became a staple of the restaurant's identity. Customers came not just for the food but for the chance to see his latest creations. Connor noticed how Liam's confidence grew with each interaction, how he began to engage more comfortably with the world around him. Mia often teased Connor about his transformation. "Who would have thought you'd go from rolling your eyes at customers to running an art gallery?" Connor grinned. Life's full of surprises, but deep down he knew it was more than that. Liam's quiet resilience and James's unwavering advocacy had fundamentally changed how Connor saw himself in the world. It wasn't just about being a better waiter, it was about being a better person. One evening as the restaurant closed, Connor sat beneath Liam's first painting, reflecting on how much had changed. The door jingled softly, and he looked up to see Liam standing there, a small package in his hands. "Hey Liam," Connor said, smiling. "What brings you here so late?" Liam handed him the package, a shy smile on his face. Inside was a smaller painting, one of a serene landscape bathed in golden light. A note accompanied it, "For your kindness. Thank you for seeing me." Connor felt his throat tighten as he read the note. He looked up at Liam, who was watching him with quiet anticipation. "Liam, this is incredible. I don't know what to say." Liam simply nodded, his eyes shining with gratitude. Connor knew then that this wasn't just about the art or the apology. It was about the connection they had forged, one built on mutual respect and understanding. Connor placed the smaller painting in a spot of honor in his apartment, where he could see it every day. It wasn't just a beautiful piece of art, it was a reminder of how much his life had shifted. The painting symbolized the journey he had taken, not just with Liam but within himself. At the restaurant, Liam's gallery wall continued to thrive. New paintings cycled in every few weeks and customers eagerly snapped them up. Liam was no longer the quiet young man who sat unnoticed at a corner table. He had become a celebrated artist in the community, his unique perspective captivating everyone who encountered his work. One evening, during a particularly busy night, the restaurant hosted a small event to celebrate Liam's contributions. The manager, who had initially been hesitant about the gallery idea, stood to make a brief speech. "I'll admit," the manager began, "I didn't fully understand the importance of what we were doing when we first brought Liam's art into the restaurant. But now, I see how it has transformed not just our space but the way we connect with our customers. Liam, your talent has made this place brighter, and we're honored to be a part of your journey." The room erupted in applause as Liam stood awkwardly, clearly unused to being the center of attention. Connor, standing nearby, gave him an encouraging nod. Liam smiled faintly and gave a small wave, his eyes shimmering with emotion. After the event, Connor found Liam sitting alone near the gallery wall, staring at one of his older pieces. Connor approached, careful not to disturb him. "Big night," Connor said softly, taking a seat beside him. Liam nodded, his fingers tracing the edge of the table. "A lot?" Connor chuckled. "Yeah, I bet. But you handled it like a pro." Liam looked at him, his expression contemplative. "Didn't think it would be like this." "Like what?" Connor asked. Liam paused, searching for the right words. "Good. People seeing me. Not just different." Connor felt a pang of regret for how he had once been part of the problem. "You've always been more than that, Liam. It just took some of us longer to see it." Liam tilted his head, his lips curling into a faint smile. "You see now." Connor nodded. "Yeah, I do. And I'm really glad I got the chance to." Over time, the impact of Liam's presence extended beyond the restaurant. Local galleries began reaching out, interested in featuring his work. He was invited to speak, albeit briefly, at community events, sharing his journey as both an artist and a young man on the spectrum. Each opportunity allowed Liam to grow more confident in his voice and his place in the world. Connor, meanwhile, continued his own transformation. Inspired by Liam's bravery, he became an advocate for inclusivity, encouraging the restaurant staff to look beyond surface-level judgments. He even began volunteering at the community center where Liam spent much of his time, helping with events and getting to know the people who frequented the space. One afternoon, while helping set up for an art workshop, Connor overheard a conversation between two young participants. "Who's that guy?" one of them asked, pointing at Connor. "That's Connor," the other replied. "He used to work at that fancy restaurant. Now he helps out here." Connor smiled to himself, feeling a quiet sense of pride. He had come a long way from the man who had once dismissed Liam without a second thought. Now he was part of something bigger, something meaningful. One day, as Connor was cleaning up after a workshop, James arrived at the community center. He approached Connor with the same calm authority as before, but this time, his expression was warmer. "I wanted to thank you again," James said, extending a hand. "Not just for Liam but for everything you've done since." Connor shook his hand, humbled by the gesture. "I should be thanking you. You and Liam changed my life." James smiled. "It's a rare thing for someone to take a hard look at themselves and decide to change. That's not something I take lightly." Connor nodded, the weight of those words settling in. "I've still got a lot to learn, but I'm trying." "And that's all anyone can ask," James said. As time passed, the restaurant became a beacon of inclusion and creativity in the community, thanks in no small part to Liam's art and Connor's transformation. The gallery wall continued to expand, showcasing not only Liam's work but also pieces from other young artists who found inspiration in his journey. Liam's confidence grew with each passing day. He began holding art workshops at the community center, teaching others how to express themselves through creativity. His sessions weren't just about art, they were about connection, about finding a way to communicate when words sometimes felt insufficient. People came from all over to learn from him, drawn by his unique perspective and gentle approach. Connor often attended these workshops, not as a volunteer but as a participant. He found solace in the quiet focus of painting, discovering that it allowed him to process his own emotions in ways he hadn't expected. Liam, ever patient, offered guidance when needed but never imposed his vision on others. He understood the importance of letting people find their own path. One evening, the restaurant hosted a special event, a gala to celebrate the one-year anniversary of the gallery wall. The dining room was transformed into an elegant exhibition space, with soft lighting illuminating the paintings. Each piece was accompanied by a small plaque with the artist's name and a brief description of their work. Liam was the guest of honor, his work taking center stage. The restaurant was packed with patrons, friends, and family, all gathered to celebrate his achievements. James stood by his side, his pride evident in the way he introduced Liam to everyone who approached. Connor watched from the edge of the room, a smile playing on his lips. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing he had played a part in creating this moment. When Liam caught his eye, he gave Connor a small nod, a gesture of quiet gratitude that spoke volumes. As the evening wound down, Connor found himself standing in front of one of Liam's paintings. It was a vibrant piece, full of swirling colors that seemed to dance across the canvas. He was so engrossed in the details that he didn't notice James' approach. "It's one of my favorites," James said, his voice soft. Connor nodded. "It's incredible." "He's incredible." James smiled. "He is. And so are you, Connor." Connor turned to him, surprised. "Me?" "You took the time to see him for who he truly is," James said. "That's no small thing. Most people never get past their assumptions." Connor felt a lump rise in his throat. "He's taught me more than I can put into words." James placed a hand on Connor's shoulder. "Then keep learning, keep growing, and keep making a difference." Connor nodded, his resolve strengthened. He wasn't just a waiter anymore. He was part of something much bigger, a movement to create a world where everyone was seen, understood, and valued. That night, as the gala came to an end, Liam approached Connor with another small canvas. This one was different from the others, simpler, more personal. It depicted two figures standing side by side, surrounded by soft, warm light. Connor took the painting, his eyes misting as he read the inscription at the bottom, "For my friend who saw me." "Thank you, Liam," Connor said, his voice thick with emotion. "This means more than you'll ever know." Liam smiled, his expression peaceful. "Thank you." As they stood together, surrounded by the hum of celebration, Connor realized that this wasn't just an ending, it was a new beginning. For Liam, for the restaurant, and for himself. And in that moment, beneath the glow of Liam's extraordinary art, Connor felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope.